Let's welcome Carolyn.
Wow, such a hard act to follow, and then you hit my heart right up the beginning. All right, so I often get asked the question, how or why did you ever get into politics? So, we're going to have to go back to 2002, 2003. There was a series of events that happened that just totally changed my life. So, 2002, I working at a local corporation, and I get laid off from my job quite unexpectedly, out of no fault of my own. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong role. So the good news was that I had a lot more time on my hands because I wasn't working crazy hours and trying to hit all kinds of deadlines. Now, one thing that you need to know about me, I love history. I truly love history. And so I got to read the book John Adams by David McCullough right about that time. And David McCullough is a Pulitzer Prize winning author. He's even received the Presidential Medal of Freedom for all the books he's written about American history. And yes, John Adams is the same book that they made the HBO movie about a few years later in 2008 that starred Paul Giamatti as John Adams. Now, when I read that book, I was really struck by the sacrifices that our foremothers and forefathers made during both the American Revolution and for the first 50 years. They put everything on the line. The United States attacked Iraq in like March 2003. And I remember that day so very, very well. I was dismayed. First of all, it looked like it was the shock and awe campaign, and there was all these black and white videos on the TV set, and you're watching it as if it's not real. But these are real bombs, destroying places and knowing that there's people there. And I was totally dismayed because I really believe that we should give diplomacy more chance. And I have to admit to you, I still wasn't working yet, so I was alone. I cried that whole afternoon. It changed me. And I realized, up until that point in my life, I usually, when it came to having opinions about religion or politics, especially if I didn't agree with people, I kind of kept my mouth shut, thinking there was no good that would come of that. But when I read John Adams and I realized what our foremothers and forefathers had done, they created this democracy, and it really depended on all the citizens being, having a voice at the table. I realized that I needed to do something different this time. And so I took some small steps. It felt like if I didn't do it, not only would I be letting them down, I'd be a really lousy citizen because they gave up so much for that. But my silence would be consensus with what was going on. And that just was not the case. So, this is new to me. I'm used to keeping my mouth shut. And so I took small steps. And you're not going to believe this, but the first step that I took that took a lot of courage on my part, I actually put a T-shirt on with a political, message that was counter to so many people that I lived around in our nation because I was taking a different issue. And that took, I know it sounds silly now, but it took courage. And then I put a sign in my yard, which really told everybody who drove by where I stood on an issue. Now, what also surprised me at the time was that some people I know did not take well to me doing these things. And so I got scorned, and I actually got taunted once.
And, it was like, I didn't back down. In fact, I had the opposite reaction. I was going to dig my heels in and stand up even stronger. And that surprised me too. So over the course of the next couple of years, I continued to make my steps. I joined the local political party for the first time in my life. I'd never done that. Always voted, always kept informed, but never joined a party. Then, continuing to take steps, I walked door to door. I actually volunteered to do these things. I walked door to door. Then I found myself at times on a corner with a protest sign at a busy corner, honk if you agree, watching my neighbors go by. I went to rallies. I led a small group where we really wanted to come to know issues. Now, I never, ever, ever dreamed I would run for office. That was what other people did. But in 2006, they came to me and said, hey, we think you should run for office. I accepted the challenge against all the odds. I worked hard. I lost that race, but I fell in love with the process. And because I have always said, to me, that was democracy on the doorstep. I eventually became an elected official, but I want to fast forward to 2015. When I had the chance of a lifetime, I found a way to be able to tell David McCullough. I got his address of his scheduler. I got to write him a letter on my official stationery so he knew I wasn't a quack. And I told him what reading that book had changed my life. Now, I never, ever, ever expected to hear anything in return, but if I'd been an author, I would want to know if I had an impact like that. Not even a week later, this letter arrived to me, and it is handwritten on his personal stationery, and I'll pass it around so you can see it's the real thing. And he was telling me that he had spent 50 years writing about American history with the very hope that citizens would learn from it and be inspired to do what they felt they needed to do. And when he came later that year to Dayton, he launched the Wright Brothers book. I got to meet him now. I had to jump the line in order for all this to happen. But I jumped the line and I got to hug him, and his wife actually told me the day my letter arrived made his day. So when I get asked, why did I get into politics? The honest answer is, I read the book, John Adams had a perfect time with what was happening in my life, and the rest is history.